The numbers are very small, and analysis...
Any burglary done with a drone is something that shouldn't happen. Any burglary shouldn't happen. I don't think you can say the numbers are small, therefore we're not going to worry about it.
Speaking of numbers small, we're getting back to your topic now. 38% of us cycle in Auckland, says Auckland Transport.
Rubbish.
Yeah, I just don't believe those
Neither
numbers.
do I.
Look, I was on the board of Auckland Transport when a group of cyclists were trying to get us to fund the Sky Path, which was a cycleway over the Harbour Bridge. And the numbers of people who were supposed to be going to ride a bike from the North Shore to Auckland and back on a daily basis were just incredible. And I live in West Auckland, and beside the Northwestern motorway, there's a cycleway. Now, I go up and down that motorway sometimes 3 times a day, and very often there's just nobody there.
And when there is, it's a Sunday, and they're out for a recreational ride. They're certainly not cycling to work.
A columnist in the New Zealand Herald today says there's a surprisingly simple reason that cycle lanes are so empty, and it's not because no one's using them. Cycle lanes are often empty because they are so efficient, and the cyclists are already at work while everyone else is still sitting at the traffic lights on the motorway on-ramp.
Oh, yeah.
No, I don't believe that. I go up that motorway quite early in the morning sometimes, and it's empty then too.
There's been a story on Stuff today about how people who live on the North Shore within walking distance of Takapuna Town Centre or walking distance of the harbour ferries are finding their streets have no parking anymore. And Auckland Transport doesn't particularly like the idea of resident parking.
No, because Auckland Transport don't actually like the idea of cars. They think their entire job is to force people into public transport, which doesn't work for most people because they don't live nearby to public transport, or as people will tell you, the buses don't turn up. And actually, people are finding their own solutions, e.g. Lime scooters. And I think this is an ideology-driven, out-of-control CCO.
Okay. I'll leave that as...
Do you call that a shot across the bow?
I'd call it a fairly strong observation, which I don't have time, thankfully, to
Yeah, I
talk
actually
about
agree
further.
with Michelle. I have to go to North Shore Hospital in a couple of weeks for a checkup, and I've tried to get a park nearby, and you just can't. I'm going to Uber there. It's the only way I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
Oh, you said CCO driven rather than CEO driven.
Yes,
Oh,
CCO.
sorry, I misheard.
Yep.
Yeah.
I was trying to process that.
Council-controlled organisation.
The search
Which
just
they're not. They're not council-controlled at all. That's the issue.
council out of controlled organisation.
No, they're out of control council organisations.
Just before we go, the search for Madeline McCann goes on. So the Metropolitan Police in the UK have been given a further £150,000. Madeline will be 14 now, and she vanished in those dramatic circumstances we all know in Portugal in 2007. The Operation Grange has cost about $25 million New Zealand so far. Is it like Pike River, worth persevering with to find justice, or is it a lost cause, Madeline McCann?
We can't judge that, but I know if I was her parent, I would never stop looking.
No, that's true.
So fair enough.
Well, yes, I think it's fair enough. It's a public tragedy. It'll just go on and on.
They don't spend that amount of money on a whole lot of parents.
No, it's a bit squeaky wheel, but the fact is, if you were the parent, you would never stop looking.
Michelle Bogue has been on the panel today. Thank you for your company, Michelle.
Pleasure.
Mike Williams, always a pleasure to see you, Mike.
Equally a pleasure. Thank you.
And thanks for your company, everybody. Appreciate that. And we are back tomorrow, and Checkpoint is on the way today very soon.
Te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. On tonight's programme, Pike River, we are returning. Almost 8 years on from the catastrophic explosion that left 29 men dead, the concrete seal blocking the entrance to the mine is coming down. Andrew Little, the minister responsible for Pike River, announced today he's going with Plan B, the single entry option through the existing portal. If all goes according to plan, the recovery team could be in and out by the end of August next year. How hard's it going to be? What are they expecting to find? And are the police forensic team prepared to go underground? We'll give you all the details. If you stream, download a game, or Netflix is your guilty pleasure, stand by for this one, the gargantuan bill for the gigabyte blowout.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, good evening. Ko Katrina Batanaho. The Pike River families are hailing today's announcement of a manned re-entry into the mine as a victory, but say their battle doesn't end here. Bernie Monk, Anna Osborne and Sonia Rockhouse were at Parliament today for the announcement, representing the relatives of the 29 men who died in the disaster 8 years ago. Here's our political reporter, Gia Garrick.
Work to break the 30-metre seal is expected to start in February. Ms Osborne says she never gave up hope today's news would arrive. She and Sonia Rockhouse say they want to be part of the group which goes back in, saying now the government has agreed to re-enter the mine, they want the opportunity to do the same. However, the minister responsible for Pike River, Andrew Little, says only a tight group of people will be authorised to have access, and they'll have to have the appropriate skills and experience. From Parliament, Gia Garrick.
The Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, has plunged into a full round of meetings with leaders at a regional security and trade summit in Singapore. She's just finished a meeting with Myanmar's leader Aung San Suu Kyi and has meetings with Chinese, Australian and American heads later in the day. Here's business editor Giles Beckford.
This is arguably the toughest day for Jacinda Ardern. She's already met Myanmar's Aung San Suu Kyi, giving her a message of concern about the condition of the hundreds of thousands of Rohingya refugees who fled what's been called near genocide. She has a first meeting with Australia's new Prime Minister Scott Morrison, and the plight of refugees on Nauru and Manus Island, as well as the deportation of Kiwis, will be discussed. Trade and human rights are said to be top of the agenda for the meeting with China's Premier Li, while the dinner meeting with US Vice President Mike Pence will touch on the vexed issue of steel and aluminium tariffs. Giles Beckford, RNZ News, Singapore.
Voting has been suspended at 20 polling stations in Fiji due to heavy rain and floodings. The election authorities say they've closed the centres under the Electoral Act. Sally Round reports.
Just over 6,000 voters had been affected by the suspension, and more venues could close before polling was due to end at 6 this evening. About 550,000 plus voters were due to vote today. The election supervisor said the polling would recommence on a date that was feasible for polling. A heavy rain warning and flash flood alert came into force last night. Halfway through polling, the authorities said there had been a worrying turnout at several polling stations in parts of the country. In Suva, Sally Round.
3,000 overseas teachers have applied to work in New Zealand following a government recruitment campaign. Ellen McGregor-Reid from the Education Ministry says applications have come from several countries, including the UK, Canada and South Africa. She says more than 550 applicants have been cleared to work here and are registered with recruitment agencies.
We are thrilled with the level of response to the overseas teacher campaign. It is only one part of our overall approach to making sure we have an education workforce for now and into the future, but it is a great response and we're really pleased with the quality of candidates coming through.
Ellen McGregor-Reid says schools have already hired more than 100 foreign teachers for next year. The mother of a teenager who was fatally assaulted in central Auckland early this year says there are no winners in the tragedy. 18-year-old Ellie Holtz was attacked in a car at the intersection of Wellesley Street and Queen Street in January. Today, Myron Felice pleaded guilty to manslaughter. It emerged in court today that he was one of 5 men involved in the fatal shooting of Auckland liquor store owner Navtesh Singh 10 years ago. Ellie's mother, Kirsten Holtz, says the guilty plea has brought 10 months of anguish and grief to an end, and while nothing could bring her son back, the family wants to move forward in a positive way. Auckland Council has launched a safety campaign to try to deal with the rising number of injuries coming from electric scooters. Since the US-based company Lime began rolling out hundreds of scooters in the city a month ago, ACC has recorded dozens of e-scooter-related injuries, including brain injuries. Auckland's Mayor Phil Goff says the council campaign, which involves a hashtag and brightly coloured posters, is only the first step in improving e-scooter safety.
This by itself is not going to revolutionise the way people are using them, but it's one other small contribution towards that end. Trying to create a culture around enjoy your scooter but ride it responsibly.
Phil Goff says Lime has not helped to pay for the safety campaign, which has cost about $10,000. The businessman David Anderson has paid tribute to his father, Sir John Anderson, who died last night in his Wellington home, aged 73. Sir John was chairman of ANZ, TVNZ and PGG Wrightson and was on the board of many other companies. He was also chairman of New Zealand Cricket. His son David Anderson has paid tribute to him.
John was a very determined man. He strove for success in everything he did. He was very dedicated to his endeavours, whether it be in sport or in business or with family.
David Anderson says his father's leadership style was like that of a coach who brought out the best in people. It's 5:05. Sport, the White Ferns captain Amy Satterthwaite concedes they were outplayed by Australia in their 2020 World Cup cricket match in Guyana. Batting first, Australia made 153 for 7, but when New Zealand slumped to 13 for 3 early on, they faced an uphill battle. Susie Bates top scored with 48, but the White Ferns were all out for 120, falling to a 33-run loss. Satterthwaite says they were outplayed in all facets of the game.
Obviously disappointed. I think probably in all three facets in a way. I think we were outplayed. I think you can't be losing sort of 8 to 10 wickets consistently and expecting to win big games. You know, there's a few people sort of chipping in, but probably not getting big enough scores.
Amy Satterthwaite. New Zealand and Australia will square off in Dublin overnight in a battle to win the hosting rights to the 2021 Women's Rugby World Cup. Leading the bid to persuade World Rugby to award the tournament to New Zealand as former Black Fern Dr. Farah Palmer, who's now a New Zealand Rugby Board member. Sports editor Stephen Hewson reports.
New Zealand has twice hosted the men's tournament in 1987 and again in 2011, but never the women's, which has been running since 1991 and has been won 5 times by the Black Ferns. 6 countries initially expressed interest in hosting the tournament, but that's been pared down to Australia and New Zealand, who initially considered a joint bid, but that was dropped in favour of each country going it alone. New Zealand and Australia will both deliver a short presentation each to round off their bids, having both spent time behind the scenes this week wooing votes from council members ahead of what's expected to be a tight outcome. The government has pledged financial support for New Zealand's bid, which would have matches played in Auckland and Whangarei. This is Stephen Hewson.
And that's the news.
They're going in.
To the Pike River families, to New Zealand, we are returning.
Families welcome a chance of closure.
We needed to fight. We need to bring our men home if we can. We need answers to questions that we don't have.
No matter what the cost.
If anyone thinks, this is a waste of money or a waste of time, put yourself in their shoes, have a think about it for a minute.
News as it breaks. Morning Report with Guy and Espiner and Susie Ferguson, weekdays from 6.
Then on 9 to noon, the murky world of drug trading on the dark net and its impact in New Zealand. And after 10, the story of New Zealand's early screen industry and the influence of idiosyncratic producer John O'Shea. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland, Auckland and Coromandel Peninsula, mainly fine. Isolated showers retreating to the east coast tomorrow. Waikato to Whanganui, including Bay of Plenty and the central high country. Fine apart from isolated afternoon and evening showers inland, some heavy. Manawatu to Wellington, fine apart from areas of cloud tomorrow morning and evening. Gisborne to Wairarapa, also Nelson, Marlborough, Canterbury and Otago, fine weather. Bulla and Westland, fine, apart from some evening cloud tomorrow, which brings a few showers to Bulla. Fiordland, mostly cloudy with patchy drizzle, turning to rain tomorrow evening. Southland, mainly fine, a few spots of rain tomorrow night, and for the Chatham Islands, mainly fine. It's almost 9 minutes past 5, and you're listening to Checkpoint.
I'm Lisa Owen. What a day for the Pike River families, a victory for the little people of New Zealand. That's how many of them are describing the decision to go ahead with a manned re-entry of the now infamous mine. It will finally happen in February of next year. Next Monday will mark 8 years since the explosion at the West Coast coal mine. 29 men were killed. It has been a long, arduous and emotional fight for the families to get this far. But when the decision was finally made public in Wellington this morning, the message was as simple and to the point. We are returning. Our political reporter Craig McCulloch was there.
8 years of emotion bubbling over with a decision at last to re-enter Pike River.
We can do this. We're going to do this. Thank you, everyone.
Anna Osborne's husband, Milton, died in the West Coast disaster, one of 29 men who went to work on November the 19th, 2010, and didn't come home. She, along with Sonia Rockhouse and Bernie Monk, have battled relentlessly for the mine to be re-entered, to be searched for remains and for answers as to what went so wrong.
To the Pike River families, to New Zealand, we are returning.
Andrew Little is the minister who approved the plan. Workers will enter the mine through the existing entrance tunnel. Officials had considered 2 other options, but deemed that the simplest and safest method. A start date has been set down for February.
It's been a long, emotional roller coaster, but today I just feel elation and all our hard work has paid off, and it's just amazing. It's a great, great feeling.
It's history, mate, in the making it today, I feel.
But for the families, the battle doesn't end here. Mr Monk hopes new evidence will be found and criminal charges brought.
Look, I want justice, I want accountability, I want the truth.
And Ms Rockhouse feels the same.
There are people that need to be held to account. 29 men were killed and everyone's just walked away.
The police will now undertake their own risk assessment and decide whether they will enter the mine themselves or leave it up to those more experienced. Police Commissioner Mike Bush won't speculate on future decisions, but fresh charges could be possible.
We've got a very open mind on this investigation.
The family members want to go into the mine themselves, to go as far as 170 metres into the drift, but Mr Little is tempering expectations.
We don't want a whole bunch of people without the skills and training to be in there. Now, we can review that, we can reassess that, but I agree with that piece of advice. As this project starts, it'll be a very tight group of people who will be authorised to enter the drift.
Regardless, today's announcement is a gigantic leap from just 14 months ago. The then national government had ruled out sending people into the mine, saying its advice was that it was unsafe to enter. And today the party says its position remains the same. The Pike River Recovery Agency has driven the planning process, consulting experts from all around the world. Its chief executive, Dave Gawn, is confident the operation can be completed safely.
It is genuinely safety first, and if we have that uncertainty, every one of us has to have the courage to say, no or stop.
But today the focus is on yes and go, the families claiming a victory for them and the country.
It's been a very long and hard fight, and one that we should never have had to have.
Everyone got sick of us and didn't want this job to happen. And we had to go out there and find all this evidence, and we shouldn't have had to do this. But we've done it, and I know that this job can be done. I know this whole job can be done.
$36 million has been put aside for the operation, up from the original $23 million budget. Atu iti whare parimata mō te hōtaka o te ahiahi, ko Craig McCulloch.
Dingy Patterson is the Chief Operating Officer of the Pike River Agency, and he'll oversee next year's re-entry. A short time ago, he told me the police had not yet made a decision on whether their team of investigators will actually go underground or if the police will train miners to do their forensic work. I asked Dingy to talk me through the re-entry step by step. From the moment the first seal is broken in mid-February, what will happen?
When we first break down that 30 metre, we're going to go in and close that door and reseal that 170 metre one. That allows us then time to pull out all the infrastructure, because there's a lot of infrastructure between the 30 metre and 170, and that was all installed there to manage for water flow. So we've got to remove that, and that will require our machinery to go in there and do that, and that'll take us about 2 weeks to do that. Then we actually break down the wall at the 170 metres.
Okay, and so at that point, what are the other significant sites as you go past that seal at 170 metres in? You are making your way down, are you not, to where Russell Smith's loader was?
Yes, we are. We're making our way down in stages, and it'll be around about 40 metres at a time that we will actually we'll do hazard. We'll go in first, do a hazard assessment on that 40 metres of roadway. We'll then come out. If there's no hazards to deal with, we'll hand over to forensic police, who will be accompanied by mining people. They'll go in and do a full forensic. Then they'll come out and they'll hand it back to the mining operations, who'll go in and advance all the mining services we need up to that point, and then we go again. So it's a continued process from here on in, and then when we get up to Russell Smith's loader, we'll have to recover that. We'll have to remove that. We'll have to remove 4 robots that are down the mine as well. And
so you're going to pull the loader out, Dingy? You're pulling the loader out?
At some stage, we will pull it out. The police will may want it for forensic, although when you think about it, that loader was actually driving in the tunnel when the explosion occurred. So that's probably irrelevant to the police, but they will clear it for us to pull out. And we need to pull that out because we've got to go 2.3 kilometres down the drift, and that's at 1.5. So we need to get it out of our road.
Okay, so you pass Russell Smith's loader, you pull it out, the forensic team goes in there, scours, takes out anything else. Where is the next significant point as you're moving down the drift? Is it at the 1.8 K mark, is it?
It'll depend. I mean, we've got no camera footage or nothing from Russell Smith's loader in.
So it's uncharted territory, Dingy, just to be clear. Once you get past the loader, the first loader, it is uncharted territory.
Most definitely. So, and we know there's a significant area of interest to us, which is a pit bottom and stone area, which is around about 1,800 metres, 1,900 metres in. And that's got all the electrical infrastructure that was installed in the mine. So that's of a real interest to us. So we want to get to that point as well. And then after that, the next point is to get to the final point, which is a rockfall. And we want to get eyes on that rockfall. We want to know what it's actually like and what's in between pit bottom and stone and the rockfall. We've seen photographs, we've seen camera footage down a borehole that far in, and it shows there is quite a debris field, but we'll deal with that at the time.
From that site at the 1.8 kilometre mark where Daniel Rockhouse's loader is, what else is there that is of interest to you? What other equipment, what other clues will be paramount there?
There is a lot of electrical infrastructure. There's transformers, there's electrical transformers, there's electrical variable speed drives, there's crushing equipment. There's a lot of electrical equipment installed in all that area because that was their main infrastructure area. And beyond that, up to the roof fall, we don't know what we're going to find. So there could be things of interest. We don't know that. That's why we need to get in there.
Dingy, are you going to bring all of that stuff out? All of the things, the electrical equipment, the diesel pump, the crusher, all of that stuff, is it going to come out?
Look, we'll bring out what's required. And there'll be some equipment that is too big to actually bring out. So we'll do forensic work on that underground. But we'll bring whatever has to come out, we'll bring it out.
Do you have confidence in the police? Because I see from the details of this particular plan that they're actually going to be doing forensic examination of the outside of the portal, right? So they've had 8 years to do that. Why haven't they done it already?
Could you just repeat that?
Yeah, I can hear that you've got issues with the airport there. Dingy, do you have confidence in the police and their ability to do a good job here? Because I see from the full analysis of the options that they're going to be doing forensic examination of the area right at the entrance to the tunnel and the outside riverbank and all around there, which presumably they could have done for the last 8 years.
Look, I've got the utmost confidence in the police. Most definitely, they've seconded detectives and detective senior sergeant to the agency, and they are putting a detailed forensic plan together. Look, the idea of that 0 to 30 metres, yes, it hasn't been examined before. It needs to be done, but it's a good place to start to actually do a training exercise, get our rhythm and our technique for the forensic work all in place. What we're going to do underground, how we're going to do it, so forth. So that's the main reasoning behind that.
You're going to do rehearsals. You're going to do rehearsals in an Otago mine, aren't you? How realistic do you think that will be?
No, look, the visit to the mine down Otago, that is mainly a familiarisation visit for the police to actually show them what it is like in an underground mine. That's the main reason for that visit down there.
Right, so to familiarise them. But they will always have experienced miners with them every step of the way.
Most definitely. After the police, the police have still got to decide whether they're coming underground or not. Hopefully they will. And
what do you mean?
So
might they not come underground?
The Commissioner of Police has still got to make a decision on that yet, and that's their decision. So what we're doing is...
What happens, Dingy, if they don't come underground?
They will train us mining people in forensic work.
So miners could potentially do the forensic work if the police decide that they don't want to enter the drift?
Yes, most definitely, with the right training. That was the original solar energy plan. The police were never going to enter the mine.
Right.
But we've got a different plan. The police are confident in the plan, and they're just getting it reviewed as well. They have to be confident in their own people, and so we're going to do a familiarisation visit. Then we're going to put them through a lot of in-depth mining training, so they're familiar with the mining environment. But at all times that they are underground, they will be accompanied by experienced mining officials and mining people.
When do you expect them to make that final decision?
I don't know on what date they will make that decision, but that'll be shortly.
Okay. So the other thing is, the plan states that if at any point it is deemed to be unsafe to continue on, that people need to be able to say no. Do you think that you're able to do that, that people are not too emotionally invested in achieving this?
Look, most definitely people will be able to say no. That's the culture of the workforce that we're employing, and that's the culture that we will lead as an agency. And at any stage, if there's anything that people aren't happy with, then we will stop and we will reassess it. Our main focus is not to be time-driven, to be event-driven. So that way we make sure safety is paramount.
Realistically, what is your time frame?
Realistically, we would like to be reaching that 30-metre seal in mid-February, reaching the 170 seal mid-March, and have the drift recovered and the forensic work all done by probably end of September, and then we have to seal the mine and rehabilitate the site and hand it back over to DOC, which would probably be around about the end of 2019.
Are you reconciled, Dingy, with the fact that that's your plan, but at any point you may have to stop?
Oh, look, most definitely, we don't know what we don't know, and there'll be a lot of things that we'll find when we get under there. And as we've said, if that stops us, then that stops us.
What do you want?
We are not going to put other people at risk.
What do you want to find from this? Best case scenario, what do you want to find from this?
Oh, look, we don't know what we'll find. The main objective for us is to get the forensic work done, and so the families can have closure.
And what will that mean for you if you're able to do that?
Oh, look, for me personally, that'd be fantastic. You know, look, I was involved in the mines rescue there from the explosion onwards, and for myself personally, and for probably every miner in New Zealand and around the world, this has been unfinished business for us. And for decision today is a complete start to be able to finish that. You know, like when we built the wall to 170, I was part of that. We left a note to those guys to say we would return. You know, today we get that opportunity to start returning.
Going to go back and collect the note, Dingy?
I would personally like to go back and collect the note, but we haven't decided on who's going to go down the mine yet.
Do you think it will be you?
Do I think it will be me? I would give my heart and soul to be part of that goes down the mine. But at some stage I'll get to go down there. But at the end of the day, safety comes first. And if the decision is that I stay outside and lead it from there, then that's what the decision is.
And who does the buck stop with?
The buck stops with two people. Myself, as being I have the statutory duties as the mine manager and the site senior executive, and with my boss, Dave Gawn, who is a CE.
Are you comfortable with that, Dingy?
Most definitely, otherwise I wouldn't be here today.
And that was Dingy Pattinson, who's the Chief Operating Officer of the Pike River Agency, talking to me there while he was at the airport waiting for a flight. Checkpoint asked the New Zealand Police when they will decide if they're on board with the recovery operation or not. They've said they can't say when and refuse to provide any further comment on the issue. The mother of a teenager who died after being attacked in Auckland's CBD this year has made an emotional plea asking people to be kind to one another. 18-year-old Eli Holtz died after he was assaulted at the intersection of Wellesley Street and Queen Street in the early hours of January 27th this year. His mother's emotional plea this morning came after her son's killer, Myron Felice, pleaded guilty to a charge of manslaughter. Our court reporter, Annika Smith, filed this report.
Today the man that killed our son entered a guilty plea in the High Court. This has brought an end to 10 months of anguish, grief and frustration for our family. It's now time for our family to reset our direction for the future. There are no winners in this tragedy. We've lost our son Eli, and the Felice family have lost their son for a season as well, and our hearts go out to them.
Just minutes after her son's killer admitted responsibility, Kirsten Holtz fronted the media outside the court with a request.
Nothing can bring our Eli back to us, but we now want to move forward in a positive and confident manner. We ask you to be kind to each other, to look out for each other. Thank you.
Eli was visiting Auckland from Whangarei when he crossed paths with Myron Felice. Crown Prosecutor Emma Smith said the teenager was being driven around by a friend in a Toyota Starlet that night.
At around 3:15 a.m, the Toyota was driving down Wellesley Street. The Toyota changed lanes to the lane which was close to where Mr Felice and his friends were standing.
What happened next was the catalyst for Felice's violent outburst.
As the Toyota drove past, Mr Holtz fired a single water pellet from a Snipe King white toy rifle at Mr Felice, hitting Mr Felice on his lower back. This angered but did not injure Mr Felice.
Miss Smith said Felice had been drinking with friends at Father Ted's bar from around 1 in the morning. She said a friend tried to hold him back as he moved towards the car that had come to a stop at the lights.
Upon reaching the passenger side of the Toyota, Mr Felice opened the door and punched Mr Holtz in the face. He then reached inside the vehicle, picked up the water pellet gun and used it to strike Mr Holtz at his body, breaking it on him.
Miss Smith said Felice knocked Eli unconscious and continued punching him as he sat strapped in the passenger seat. Felice was eventually pulled away from the scene by a friend.
Mr Holtz was soon transported to Auckland Hospital. However, the severity of Mr Holtz's injuries were such that he never regained consciousness. A CT scan of his head showed bleeding over the surface of the brain, brain swelling and bleeding in the CSF spaces of the brain.
Eli was put on life support and died the following day. Felice, who had name suppression up until his plea, was due to go on trial next week. Now 30, he was 22 when he and 5 other men were charged with the murder of Manyarewa liquor store owner Navtesh Singh, who was shot dead in 2008. He was found not guilty of murder or manslaughter, but convicted of aggravated robbery. Felice's whānau and relatives of Mr Holtz packed the public gallery to standing capacity this morning. After the hearing, members from both sides embraced one another in the High Court's sunlit atrium. Felice will be sentenced on the 28th of February next year. Atu i te ko te mātua, ko Annika Smith aho.
Well, if you enjoy a bit of gaming, online streaming or Netflix, this is a cautionary tale for you. A single mum has been slugged with a bill running into the thousands from Vodafone after exceeding her monthly broadband cap. Kerry Law lives in Kaiwaka, north of Auckland, and is on a rural monthly deal with Vodafone that's capped at 120 gigabytes. But after her family went over their internet limit in the school holidays, she got a text warning her a whopper bill was on the way. It's taken weeks to get answers from Vodafone, and I talked to Kerry earlier and asked her to relive the horror moment when she got the details of her big bill.
I thought I was going to throw up. I've felt so ill throughout the whole ordeal.
Because I imagine it was a hell of a shock. What was the number?
Pardon? Oh, the price of the bill. It's gone up to over $7,000 because it's also got my phone bill on there, plus the GST added on top.
Was there any warning that you were about to crack your usage limit for your broadband?
No, I just got a text on the Monday saying that there'd been excessive use of the internet, but I'd been away over the weekend. And I thought, oh my goodness, what's happened here? So I rang Vodafone straight away on the number that was on the text, and the call centre said, no, you haven't bought any flexi data. We can't see any extra charges here. You'll be fine.
So you get this monster bill. Well, to start off with, why aren't you on an unlimited wireless contract anyway? Why have you got a cap?
Because with the rural broadband with Vodafone, it only goes up to 120 at the time that I signed up. I'm not sure of their new plans. So 120 gig is what you've got. What normally happens when you chew that up? Does it just switch off? Just dies. That's it. Yeah. The kids normally tell me, Wi-Fi's out.
Right. So that's how you know you've used it, and there's no fear of gobbling up extra money by using above your limit, because it just cuts out normally.
Yeah, it just goes. Unless I go in and ask to buy extra flexi data.
Okay, so you call Vodafone after getting the horror bill, and do they tell you it's your fault?
Yeah. After about 11 phone calls, I got a call back from a manager who was really rude. I was getting so angry with her, and she was just blaming me, saying that I'd bought extra flexi data, and I can't actually see how that happened.
Kerry, you got 4 kids. Is it conceivable that one of them went online, signed up for some extra data, and clocked this up? What ages are they?
No. 13. I've got a 13-year-old boy, a 10-year-old boy, and 8-year-old twin girls.
Have you done forensic interviews with them? Did any of them sign on for this?
Yeah. My boy's the only one that asks for extra things, like with his gaming and stuff, and he's always really good because he buys a lot of extra things to play his games with, and he always comes and asks first.
How confident are you that you didn't sign up for extra and nobody in your family signed up for extra?
I'm really confident because Vodafone has said that I signed up for extra flexi data on the 7th of October, yet nobody used the internet until the 12th of October. Wouldn't our phones have been going like absolutely mad, with notifications if we had Wi-Fi running through the house?
How stressful was this for you? Because you're a single mum, aren't you? You've got 4 kids. You're dealing with one child who's sick, I understand. So what was this like?
Really? Oh, it was horrible because I don't even have a vehicle worth that much that I could trade in to pay the bill. It's just, it was so scary.
Yeah.
And you can't even talk to Vodafone because nobody knows what they're doing at the call centre.
So we followed this up for you. We sent an email at about 3:30 yesterday, and then you got an email about an hour after we sent an email to Vodafone asking what was going on. So you get this email back miraculously, and what does it say to you?
That the extra charges have been wiped, but they just want me to pay for this month's Wi-Fi bill, which is, we haven't even had Wi-Fi this month because they put a block on it. But I kind of just had to accept it because I'd rather pay $84 than $7,000.
Well, it probably goes without saying, Kerry Law is ditching Vodafone and going with a local provider. She's dumping Vodafone as her mobile phone provider as well. We have been in touch with Vodafone today, and they say they have apologised to Kerry and waived the $7,000 bill. $7,000, yes, but that is on the condition that she pays up for October and November bills at the rate she was being charged in her contract. It says it's going to review the way it offers casual rates for 3 cents a megabyte, it says. It also says they intend to make the conditions and costs clearer to customers. We spoke to Kathy Geek, who told us it's not good enough the way Kerry had to wait weeks before resolving her situation, and Vodafone still gets it wrong from time to time, and customer care needs to improve. Time now for the news with Katrina Batten.
The man to lead the re-entry into the Pike River mine says he'll now be able to fulfil a promise he made to recover the bodies of those who died. Today, the government announced an attempt will be made early next year to re-enter the mine to try to recover the bodies of the 29 men. The Chief Operating Officer of the Pike River Agency, Dingy Patterson, has told Checkpoint he's thrilled to have the chance to finish the job. The Prime Minister has plunged into a full round of meetings with leaders at a regional security and trade summit in Singapore. Jacinda Ardern has just finished a meeting with Myanmar's leader Aung San Suu Kyi, where she expressed concern about the Rohingya crisis. She's due to have her first meeting with Australia's new Prime Minister, Scott Morrison. The Education Ministry says 550 of the 3,000 overseas teachers who've applied to work here have been cleared and are now registered with recruitment agencies. The Ministry's Ellen McGregor-Reid says a government recruitment campaign has netted applications from countries including the UK, Canada and South Africa. She says schools have already hired more than 100 foreign teachers for next year. A crew member has died on board a New Zealand registered fishing boat off Banks Peninsula. The Transport Accident Investigation Commission says the person was fatally injured on the factory deck of the Sand Granite early this morning. The fishing company Sanford has confirmed the person was a crew member on one of its vessels. A body has been found in the search for an Auckland woman missing for more than 2 days. 50-year-old Michelle Simpson was last seen walking along Wairere Road in Waitakere on Monday. The police say they found a body this afternoon in the area where they'd been searching. Auckland's wastewater service is blaming private sewage pipes for human waste on city beaches. Nearly 650 samples were taken at 20 beaches with water quality problems over the past 4 years. Up to half showed human sewage to be the leading source of contamination. Watercare says as well as fixing leaking pipes, residents also need to make sure they're not blocking them with wet wipes, fats or oils. Those are the headlines. I'm back at 6.
And you're with Checkpoint. I'm Lisa Owen. Do send us your feedback. Text us on 2101 if you've got anything to say about the stories we've been running today, including the $7,000 Vodafone bill and what you think of the plan to re-enter the Pike River mine. Are you for it or against it, and why? You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ as well, and our email address checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. Right, Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern has what promises to be one of the busiest and more important days of her visit to Singapore for Security and Trade Summit. She has a series of bilateral meetings today with the leaders of Myanmar, China, Thailand and Australia, culminating tonight with a meeting with the US Vice President Mike Pence at his request at a leaders' dinner. Our business editor, Giles Beckford, is accompanying the Prime Minister and joins us now from Singapore. Hi, Giles. What are the themes the Prime Minister is going to be pushing at this regional summit?
Well, in particular, Lisa, it will be trade and security, and also those broader issues of human rights and climate change concerns. With each of the meetings, of course, there's something specific that she wants to raise. She's just finished her meeting with Aung San Suu Kyi. As you're hearing in that news bulletin, she did raise the issue of the Rohingya refugees and whether New Zealand, in fact, can make some contribution to resolving that crisis. She's said to them that New Zealand is willing to do whatever it can to try and improve the plight of the refugees and find them security and safety. With Scott Morrison, of course, it's the first time for her to meet him face to face, although they've had obviously other communications. She says she will be raising with him the issue of the way that Kiwis are being deported, that whole deportation policy with him, and whether, in fact, there might be some changes that Australia might be willing to make. And on the broader issue of refugees on Nauru and Manus Island, she has told us previously that she doesn't expect really much progress on that issue, but she will renew the offer to him that New Zealand is ready to help where it can. With China, Premier Lee, it's largely going to be trade. New Zealand's in the midst of a renegotiation of the free trade deal with China, so she'll be looking to get around any blockages that might occur there, try and hurry along progress. But there are broader issues of regional security, China's assertion of its territorial rights in the South China Sea, which is causing a good deal of concern around this part of the world, and also the Belt and Road Initiative, and the way that China is playing its diplomatic cards. And finally, and this is probably the one that surprised most people, There's a leaders' dinner for the those attending the East Asia Summit, and the Americans, completely out of the blue, apparently. Mike Pence is asked to sit next to Jacinda Ardern at the dinner there. So
a dinner date, Giles, an up-close and personal dinner date. Why? Why?
Well, I'm not quite sure. Remembering Mike Pence is the man who said some time ago, I think, on an election trail, that, of course, he wouldn't ever sort of go out with another woman or be seen separately with another woman if his wife didn't approve. So one assumes that Mrs. Pence has approved of this one. It's an easy way, I suppose, for the United States administration to make a bit of closer contact with New Zealand, but without having to go through perhaps the messiness of White House meetings and a lot of the vexed issues. But certainly she will be knocking on the door, asking about those tariffs on aluminium and steel. I mean, it's a minor issue, really. It matters not one jot to New Zealand economy, but it's the principle of the matter, that if we're such a good trading partner and such a good friend, that we should have such a tariff imposed upon us. And I assume that she'll also, one of the themes that she has been pushing is multilateralism, which is basically we all hang together or we all hang separately. And it's actually better if we all stick together to try to solve problems. And I think that's a message she might want to deliver to Mr. Pence, a message that might not be necessarily in tune with what's happening in the White House.
Yeah, well, so Giles, tell us a little bit about that in terms of what kind of tone is used in these kinds of conversations, because a lot of the issues that you have mentioned that she's talking to all these world leaders about are curly things that we don't agree on.
She takes, as you would expect with Jacinda Ardern, she takes a reasoned and a reasonable tone. It's not confrontational. She, I think, realises that there's not much to be gained by going at it like a bull at a gate. But certainly there's a degree of assertiveness. It's making quite clear that New Zealand, although it may be small and at the bottom end of the world, has significant interests in a lot of issues and is willing to participate as a good international partner. And that by discussion, by diplomacy, by convention, and by agreeing on rules and sticking to them, then the world is a better place. And that's in keeping with the sort of tone and message she was giving at the United Nations, if you remember, a couple of months ago, which was that cooperation, humanity, perhaps a little bit more thinking beyond the dollar, beyond trade deals, beyond economic gains and that. That is where, in fact, the world has to go, and New Zealand wants to lead that way.
Well, speaking of trade gains, what's happening to the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership? It's called RCEP for short. I think we need to work on the title, but what's going on with that?
Well, it's the alphabet soup of international trade deals, as always with these things. You know, TPP and FTAP is another one that will raise its head in due course. RCEP is arguably the biggest proposed trade deal in the world. It would cover half the world's population, about a third of world trade and economic growth. It's the ASEAN 10 nations from Southeast Asia and the 6 nations who have free trade deals with them. That includes Australia, New Zealand, the United States, China, and India. And of course, one of the things is that New Zealand's been trying to make progress with India on a free trade deal for yonks, and has got very, very, well, it's barely got off the drawing board. So it would have been a nice way to perhaps get a backdoor free trade deal with India. But it would seem that, as always in these things, the discussions have hit a snag on the words, how fast they're able to say we have made progress and we are close to a final deal. For some countries, that means more than others. India, in particular, is being singled out as one that's sort of a little reluctant to commit to a final deal. So the hopes were that there would be some sort of draft agreement sort of presented at this summit. That's not going to happen. It's going to be kicked down the road. There'll be another year of talks, negotiations. Perhaps this time next year, people might be saying we're close to an RCEP deal. But for now, no.
Giles, thanks for joining us. That is Giles Beckfast, our business editor, who's in Singapore following along with the Prime Minister's trip. Now, he's obviously way too busy to monitor closely the close of the markets today. So for those of you waiting with bated breath, this is my best Giles Beckford impersonation. The NZX Top 50 Index fell 0.4% or 30 points to close at 8,828. And the New Zealand dollar is buying 67.8 US cents, 93.8 Australian cents and 52.1 British pence. Residents and business owners of quake-damaged properties just south of Kaikoura are questioning why their homes remain red-stickered when the railway line behind them will be operational again in just a few weeks. Today marks 2 years since Kaikoura was hit by a 7.8 magnitude quake, but while many in the district are trying to move on with their lives, some just can't. It's not their fault. Decisions by local and central authorities force them to stay away from their quake-damaged homes, and businesses, due to the danger posed by steep cliffs, I'll try that again, and rockfall. So how is Kiwi Rail able to operate a passenger service directly behind their homes and the cliff? Our South Island video journalist Logan Church picks up the story from a seemingly abandoned motel at the side of State Highway 1.
I'd just gone to bed, Emiko was still watching TV and the earthquake hit, and I tried to get out of bed and find my leg because I have a prosthesis and the power had gone out, so I was grappling around in the dark, finally found it, and we managed to get out of the motel and up onto the railway line at the back of our place.
That's Sam Leary. He and his wife Emiko own the Ocean View Motel, about half an hour south of Kaikoura. They've owned this slice of paradise for 18 years. It sits in front of the coastline, and the view is simply breathtaking.
It was a very special place and a great place to go fishing from.
And a great view, of course, that ocean view. Summertime is every day that we can see the dolphins, hundreds of dolphins, just there.
But no one's checked in here since the quake. It's now locked up, slowly being consumed by Mother Nature. Sam and Emiko are not allowed to step foot inside the building.
We haven't been able to run the motels for the last 2 years, and we've been red carded since almost immediately after the earthquake. So we're now awaiting a decision from council as regards the section 124 red card.
Sam doesn't criticise the council for this, unlike other residents Checkpoint spoken to. More on the council response soon. But here's the problem. Behind the 4-room motel is a massive cliff. You can see big cracks at the top. The motel's back garden is littered with massive boulders that came down that cliff during the earthquake. Their buildings were mercifully spared from the rain of boulders. Sam and Emiko's neighbour, Kevin McQuillan of Para Rocks Cafe and Bar, is in a similar boat, and he's found delays in finding a way forward soul-destroying.
They tell us, oh, you'll get a decision in May. When May comes, oh, you'll get a decision in June. And it just goes on and on and on, and there's nothing. And then they rang me up a few weeks ago, the council rang me up and asked me how I was. Wow. She found out how I was.
The government's given the local council $1.5 million to find a solution for 15 properties like these. Sam thinks that's chump change.
They've got their hands on the purse. They can make it a lot easier for the small council like this. And this problem is going to crop up again throughout New Zealand. There's no question about it.
But what makes these properties unique is that between the motel buildings that the council deemed unsafe and that cliff which the council says has a very high risk of rockfall is the main rail line. And passenger trains will be using it from the start of December.
One rock came down, smashed the post as part of the fence and ended up on the rail line, which we understood was then struck by a train after that. The fence post has been replaced, and it's obvious where it's been, but nothing's been heard of it.
When was that?
That was
July.
July, around about July.
This year.
Yeah.
So stuff was still coming down off the hill in
Yes.
July.
Yes. Certainly it's a danger to us, but I'm personally more concerned about the international effect if we had a bad accident with a train full of tourists, and that would demolish all the promotion work that Kaikoura has been doing and doing very well.
They say they tried to tell Kiwi Rail about it.
That was extremely difficult. Extremely.
In what way?
Well, we got onto the phone, and then we'd get passed on to somebody else and passed on to somebody else and passed on to somebody else, and then we'd get background music and this sort of carry on, and in the end we just said, oh.
I spoke to Kiwi Rail's Investments Planning and Risk General Manager David Gordon about this issue. The big question, is that section of the line safe?
We take the view that we don't run the trains unless it's safe, and if we genuinely believe that through a combination of our engineering and the safety systems and all the rest, there was still a significant risk to the safety of people either operating our trains or travelling on our trains, we wouldn't be operating through there. We are confident the combination of safety things we have in place provide for the safe travel of people. Well, put another way, I would absolutely travel on one of those trains, and I'm really looking forward to doing so.
I also asked about that July incident Sam talked about earlier.
I've got no knowledge of that, but I will test again. I mean, I have no doubt that where we've got tripwires, it's there because the slope is, is slightly unstable. Therefore, you will get stuff hitting it. If you've got a train can hit a tiny bit of bolt, hit a tiny piece of rock. I mean, the train is always going to win that. It's not as if it's going to come off the lines for that.
We asked the ministers that have seemed to have taken responsibility for land hazard issues, Megan Woods, Nanai Mahuta and Chris Farfoy, for an interview. Again, we have made repeated requests over the last few months. That was, again, declined or ignored, with the exception of a brief statement from Ms Mahuta's office, which didn't add anything new and did not answer any allegations we've put to them. They say they are waiting for the council to decide what it's going to do. The predicament all 15 property owners are in is tricky. Every resident Checkpoint spoken to with a red-stickered property wants to be paid out in full. The $1.5 million the government gave the council to find a way through is not enough to do that, not even close. The council's chief executive, Angela Oosthuizen, gave me an update as to where the council is at.
At the last council meeting, we were anticipating that we would table a report. Unfortunately, that report has been delayed, as I said, and we are anticipating that report will be brought to council in December at some point. So Crown has given us $1.5 million, and I guess what we're working through is how we then share that funding equitably amongst the property owners while taking the risks into account.
Why was that report delayed?
It was delayed because as I said, we're still working through the policy and we're still working through the criteria, and of course we're still working with the various governmental agencies that are providing support to us in this area. So the process does take long, it is complex, and it has taken longer than what we envisaged it was going to be.
But as another earthquake anniversary comes around, for some people that devastating earthquake might as well have happened yesterday.
Personally, I don't really want to come back onto this property again.
Me too.
To me, it appears to be just a gigantic pile of shattered rocks that could go in any direction.
To something totally different now. Illegal or poorly maintained private sewage and stormwater pipes are being blamed for a large amount of human poo polluting Auckland beaches. Sewage overflow is a problem that doesn't seem to be going away for the city, and DNA testing has revealed that household sewage is one of the main sources of contamination. Jessie Chang reports.
It's a sunny day out at Takapuna Beach on Auckland's North Shore, and plenty of people are milling about. The popular beach has been identified as having water quality problems, with human waste in the area proving difficult for Watercare and Auckland Council to deal with. But it's not just Takapuna that's affected. Over the past 4 years, council DNA testing at about 20 Auckland beaches known to have problems has found human waste as a leading source of contamination. It represents more than half of the 646 DNA samples taken. Ageing wastewater infrastructure has been blamed for the overflow in the past, but Anna Nama from Watercare says that's wrong.
The sources that we've identified to date predominantly tend to be related to people that have cross-connected on their wastewater to the stormwater, private pipes that have a tendency to fail and leak over time. We've got nothing that indicates that Watercare's infrastructure is inadequate.
Anna Nama says their findings from Takapuna Beach are a good example.
We've identified a toilet block in their private pipes, the private wastewater pipes, actually leaching wastewater and entering into the stormwater system. And then onto the beach. So, the positive result that was identified from Takapuna was a direct result of poor private infrastructure and not ageing infrastructure from Watercare.
He says people disposing fats, oils or wet wipes down into sewage systems also cause blockages, and that too can lead to overflow problems. Mr Nama says Watercare can only do so much.
If we continually say it's a Watercare issue, we will not solve the problem, because the majority of the problem will be associated with stuff that should not be getting into our network that is getting into our network by people putting things down.
Nick Viger is from the council's Safe Swim branch, which looks at water testing. He encourages anyone with suspected pipe leakages to get in touch.
There's a fair degree of expense in trying to track these problems, so we're more than happy if people come to us and say, look, we think there's an issue. Absolutely, we'll help and resolve that issue with them.
And the public milling about at Takapuna Beach today say homeowners need to step up.
I see there's a big drain up there outside one big private house and just sitting high on the beach, and I'm thinking, what's going into that?
Yeah, because they're closest to the waters, right? We should keep an eye out for it.
We should all do a bit for the environment and others around us as well.
They are wary of swimming in the area.
I wouldn't get in there.
The water is really not clean at all.
I'd still keep swimming here, I think, but you'd be more aware of the problem.
Nick Viger says the public should make sure they check the Safe Swim website, which shows the water quality at beaches before they go swimming. He says council has been working hard on identifying and fixing the wastewater issues, but it won't be a quick fix. Mō te hōtaka o te ahi nei, Kōjisi Chang tēnei.
A man has been charged with murder after a shooting which left the victim dead and a South Auckland community in shock. The victim died on the footpath of Zelda Avenue in Otara after being shot last night. Matthew Tunison was at the scene today.
Some residents had to find somewhere else to stay the night after armed police shut down the quiet suburban street. They were still out in force this morning, with officers carrying automatic rifles guarding a 100-metre cordon and preventing people from entering, even people who live there. Officers went to the area after receiving reports of gunfire about 10 p.m. and found a man injured on the sidewalk. Medical attention was provided by members of the public and police, but he died at the scene. A black tent was set up on the footpath this morning, which forensics teams were seen entering. With her daughter translating, one woman says she was pulling her car into her driveway about 10 p.m. when she heard what she was sure was a gunshot. It sounded very close.
She said that when they were driving in, turning to the driveway right here, and then the gunshot.
The woman says she's frightened and didn't leave the house until her daughter came and picked her up about 11:30 a.m.
She's scared. She wants to go back home.
Back to Samoa.
Yeah.
Rachel Hapimana lives about a block away. Last night she went down the road to get some dinner, and when she returned there were police everywhere.
We were left to sit here for 3 hours waiting, and then the police officer said that we could go back but on foot. They were really jumping and I thought he was going to put his gun on me or something. I had to show my hands that I had nothing. It was that scary, they were really jumpy.
Jamie Lee Langi also heard what she now assumes was a gunshot.
I just heard a really big noise, and then I came out of my room, and 10 minutes after the cops came and they were standing outside with a gun. Yeah, it's frightening.
Other residents RNZ spoke to reported hearing multiple shots that they thought were fireworks.
We saw the police cars around, fire engine was out here and ambulance, but that was about it.
And before that you heard?
Like firecrackers going on, but for us it was fireworks going on.
How many?
About 4 or 5.
A 35-year-old man, who is believed to be known to the victim, has been charged with murder and is due to appear in the Manukau District Court tomorrow. Police say they aren't looking for anyone else in connection with the incident. They are still working to confirm the identity of the victim and wouldn't provide further comment. In Auckland, for Checkpoint, call Matthew Tunis in Tēnei.
We've got time now for some of your feedback, returning to our earlier story about Pike River and the plan to re-enter the mine in February of next year. The police haven't decided whether they'll send their forensic teams underground yet. And this from someone on that particular point. I fail to see how this can work from a legal standpoint, they say. The defence would be able to drive a truck through the gathering of forensic evidence by non-specialists. I can't see how a bona fide crime committed could ever be successfully prosecuted. This is a very serious issue, they say, and training required would be in forensic science and analysis, as well as detailed knowledge of legal and criminal court procedures. I remain sceptical, says this person, because we've been told if the police do not go back into Pike River to do the forensic and evidential collection, that miners will be trained potentially to do that. Another person, Brian, says it's ridiculous to open up the mine. The men are buried, so you endanger life to unbury bodies in order to re-bury them. People have strong feelings on this. We'll bring you more feedback later in the show.
RNZ News at 6. Kia ora, good evening. Ko Katrina Batanaho. The man who will lead the re-entry into the Pike River mine says he'll be fulfilling a promise he made to recover the bodies of those who died. Today, the government announced an attempt will be made to re-enter the mine early next year in an attempt to recover the remains of the 29 men who died in an explosion 8 years ago. The Chief Operating Officer of the Pike River Agency, Dingy Patterson, told Checkpoint he's thrilled to have the chance to finish the job.
For myself personally, and probably every miner in New Zealand and around the world, this has been unfinished business for us, and for decision today is a complete start to be able to finish that. You know, like when we built the wall to 170, I was part of it. We left a note to those guys to say we would return. Today, we get that opportunity to start returning.
Chief Operating Officer of the Pike River Agency, Dingy Patterson. Meanwhile, people on the streets of Greymouth who have been paying tribute to the families of those who died in the disaster. Coralie Cowie says the decision to re-enter the tunnel is a huge victory for the families who have continued their fight to fight for this day, even when their cause seemed completely lost.
The ones that have stood out there for all of them have done an amazing job, and to finally have this outcome is I don't want to say relief, but it's put everything in place for them, and what they fought for has finally come to a head for them, which is really great.
Greymouth local Coralie Cowie. New Zealand is offering to help Myanmar resolve the crisis involving hundreds of thousands of Rohingya refugees. The offer has been made by the Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern at a meeting with Myanmar's leader Aung San Suu Kyi on the sidelines of the East Asia Summit in Singapore today. Ms Ardern repeated New Zealand's long-standing concern about the plight of the Rohingya and indicated that New Zealand is willing to assist in any way to find a permanent solution. Later this evening, Ms Ardern will meet Australia's Prime Minister Scott Morrison for the first time, followed by China's Premier Li Keqiang and the US Vice President Mike Pence. A crew member has died on board a New Zealand-registered fishing boat off Banks Peninsula. The Transport Accident Investigation Commission has opened an inquiry into the death which happened on board the San Granite. Chief Investigator Tim Burfitt says the person was fatally injured on the factory deck of the vessel early this morning. 2 investigators are being sent to meet the boat when it docks in Timaru. The fishing company Sanford has confirmed the person was a crew member on one of its vessels. A body has been found in the search for an Auckland woman who hasn't been seen for more than 2 days. 50-year-old Michelle Simpson was last seen walking along Waiarere Road in Waitakere on Monday morning. The police say they found a body this afternoon at a property in the area where they'd been searching. While formal identification is yet to take place, the body is believed to be that of Ms Simpson. Her family has been notified and the matter has been referred to the coroner. 3,000 overseas teachers have applied to work in New Zealand following a government recruitment campaign. The Education Ministry says 550 have so far been cleared to work. Our education correspondent John Gerritsen reports.
Overseas recruitment is part of the government's attempt to tackle a teacher shortage and is aimed at foreign teachers and returning New Zealanders. The ministry says schools can contact recruitment companies if they want to interview teachers who have made it through a screening process. It says schools have already made job offers to 100 overseas teachers. The Auckland Primary Principals Association says schools need quality New Zealand-trained teachers and the mass appointment of foreign teachers could cause problems. Ko John Gerritsen tēnei.
Auckland's wastewater service is blaming private pipes and not its systems for human waste on city beaches. Nearly 650 samples were taken over the past 4 years at 20 beaches where there have been water quality problems. Up to half showed human sewage to be the leading source of contamination. Ageing wastewater infrastructure has been blamed in the past for the overflow, but Anna Nama from Watercare says leakages from private homes are responsible.
If we continually say it's a water care issue, we will not solve the problem because the majority of the problem will be associated with stuff that should not be getting into our network that is getting into our network by people putting things down.
Anna Nama says things like wet wipes, fats and oils block the pipes. Voting has now been suspended at 26 polling stations in Fiji due to heavy rain and flooding, affecting more than 7,000 voters. The Supervisor of Elections, Mohammed Sanim, says the ballots already cast at the suspended stations would be shredded and fresh ballot papers would be issued. More than 500,000 voters in Fiji were due to cast their ballot in today's general election, which is just the second in 12 years. The polls are due to close about now. It's 6:05. Sport. The White Ferns have slumped to a second straight loss at the Women's 2020 Cricket World Cup in Guyana, losing to Australia by 33 runs. Batting first, Australia made 153 for 7, but when New Zealand fell to 13 for 3 early on, they faced an uphill battle. Susie Bates top scored with 48, with the White Ferns all out for 120. It means they'll now have little chance of qualifying for the knockout phase of the tournament. Winning the hosting rights for the 2021 Women's Rugby World Cup would be a great reward for many former players, says New Zealand Rugby Board member Dr. Farah Palmer. Palmer, a former player herself, is one of the lead presenters of New Zealand's bid in Dublin tonight. The tournament was first played in 1991, and while the Black Ferns have won the trophy 5 times, New Zealand has never hosted the tournament.
For me as an ex-Black Fern, this is really important, and if we did win, it would just be the icing on the cake for many of us who've been waiting for this opportunity. You know, like we've won 5 World Cups, and this is the first time we've put in a bid to host the Women's Rugby World Cup. It'll mean a lot for New Zealand rugby and players who've played rugby.
Dr. Farah Palmer. And New Zealand has won its opening game at the Under-17 Women's Football World Cup in Uruguay, beating Finland 1-0. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, the comedian James Nakise interviews TV presenter Hayley Holt in the shower. It's their happy place. There may also be fried chicken. Nick Tipping brings the jazz, and there's a sofa session with the Irish musicians Mick Flannery and Lisa O'Neill.
England has my man.
That's Nights with me, Brian Crump.
My body is cold.
After the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland, Auckland and Coromandel Peninsula, mainly fine. Isolated showers retreating to the east coast tomorrow. Waikato to Whanganui, including Bay of Plenty and the Central High Country, fine apart from isolated afternoon and evening showers inland, some heavy. Manawatu to Wellington, fine apart from areas of cloud tomorrow morning and evening. Gisborne to Wairarapa, also Nelson, Marlborough, Canterbury and Otago, fine weather. Bulla and Westland, fine apart from some evening cloud tomorrow, which brings a few showers to Bulla. Fiordland, mostly cloudy with patchy drizzle, turning to rain tomorrow evening. Southland, mainly fine, a few spots of rain tomorrow night. And for the Chatham Islands, mainly fine. It's exactly 8 minutes past 6 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
And I'm Lisa Owen. A chance for closure and accountability. Just some of the reaction coming today from Greymouth to the news that there will be a manned re-entry of the Pike River mine starting in February, 8 long years after the explosion that claimed the lives of 29 men. The aim of the $36 million operation? Well, to recover the remains of the victims and search for clues about the cause of the disaster. Conan Young filed this report from the West Coast.
Garth Elliott has been at the forefront of helping to look after the families of those who died in the mine, the people left behind to pick up the pieces and somehow carry on, often without their main breadwinner. Unions have set up a trust to help the children of the 29 with their education. The Etu organiser says re-entering the mine is a good start in helping the families to move on.
A lot of people talk about closure, but I don't think there's going to be closure for a lot of the families and a lot of people, in fact, for quite some time. And I don't think it's going to take just this to create the closure. But at the very least, it'll give them some understanding of what might have happened up there, if there are any remains up there, to sort of bring them home to the families.
Grey District Mayor Tony Cockshawn, who was a central figure in the response to the disaster, says after 8 years of bad news, today the families finally had something to be glad about.
Not just the families, coasters have been waiting for this day. We've had a lot of false starts, we've had a lot of pain on the way. There's never really been any good news, but today, after 8 years, we've got some news, and that is that the coalition government does care about the families.
I didn't have to search for long to find people on the streets of Greymouth today who knew the families of the men. Coralie Cowie paid tribute to them for continuing to fight for this day, even when their cause seemed completely lost.
They have fought amazingly hard for this, and I think for some of them it's been too painful to be out there fighting, and I think that the ones that have stood out there for all of them have done an amazing job, and to finally have this outcome is I don't want to say relief, but it's put everything in place for them, and what they fought for has finally come to a head for them, which is really great.
Ali Elam says the pain of that day is still very fresh for people in this town.
Actually, we've never really fully recovered. So I just think it's a huge, huge victory for the families and the West Coast community itself, because we all knew somebody up there.
And so why do you think it is important to get in there and try and recover any bodies and work out why this actually happened?
Well, if one of my family members were in there, I'd be acting exactly the same.
Pat Kennedy hopes they uncover clues as to why the mine exploded and finally manage to hold somebody accountable for what happened.
To me, there was too much pressure on making money, getting the coal out in a hurry, all those shortcuts that were taken, the pressure from the management, and Peter Whittle should never have walked away from this.
However, Jane Wells says the men should be left to rest in peace.
One fellow I know really well, his family are happy for him to be where he is. They always said that right from the start. Yes. I can understand the others wanting to go in, but what are they going to find? It's going to be quite horrific if they do find something.
After the explosive methane is purged from the mine, a team will enter the entry tunnel, first as far as a seal 170 metres inside, and then beyond as far as an area of rockfall. They will be looking for clues as to what caused the explosion and be ready to recover any remains. Electrical equipment just before the rockfall will be examined to see if an electrical fault is to blame. Today, Bernie Monk, whose son died, expressed hope a team might be able to go beyond the rockfall to where it's thought the men are most likely to be. Tony Cockshawn says he's been told this is unlikely to happen.
That rockfall, and I've been over this with the Pike Agency, this rockfall is between 20 and 50 metres long, and it takes up the full portal. So you won't get past that rockfall. It's extremely dangerous, Pike Agency tell me, to even attempt to get past that.
The Pike River Recovery Agency has given itself until June 2020 to complete the exhaustive work of safely re-entering the mine and properly investigating what's gone on inside. In Greymouth for Checkpoint, ko Conan Young tēnei.
Tony Forster is a former Chief Mines Inspector and he knows well the re-entry options that were submitted for the government's consideration. Earlier this afternoon, I asked him if the one option that was chosen really is the least dangerous.
It's not particularly dangerous. It would always have to be an issue of going in the drift. The drift would always have to be made safe. and the second entry options were basically potentially thousands of metres away. So you can't discard the condition of the drift. And there's so many unknowns. We know what we know at the moment from previous entries and from the robots going in and the film that was taken at that time. But really, we won't know until the drift is re-entered. So I agree with Dave Conn that we'll only know those things when we enter. It's an assessment I made some years ago as well. And re-entering places like the tunnel is, again, something that's happened many times before, and it's a systematic process. There will be a reassessment that will follow a dynamic process where the issues are examined, it's considered, there's a re-risk assessment done, and it will be done in a steady, very systematic process. So I've got no concerns about that, and we'll really only know what we're dealing with in terms of the tunnel structure when we clap eyes on it.
So a significant part of this is taking the police teams into the site so that they can examine it as a crime scene forensically and also look for remains. So in your professional view, after an explosion of this nature, what might be salvageable from the critical sites inside?
I think there'll be a great deal that's salvageable because the areas that we're particularly interested in, pit bottom and so on, were shielded from the main blast that came through the tunnel. And remember, we've had access to the outer area of the tunnel for some time. So I've been able to look for a good part of 3 years. I had on and off looking at the condition of conveyors and different bits and pieces that have been subject to the blast. And they certainly hadn't been consumed by flames or mangled beyond recognition. So I think there's a great deal. And I have been into mines on several occasions after there's been blasts and forensically recovered the situation, and we won't know until we see it. I mean, there's no point in assuming all this stuff. There's a lot of assumption has gone on over the last few years, and I think it's time to stop that. I think it's time to start dealing with the reality and deal with what we actually see. And when we see what's available, then we'll be able to make a more solid judgment.
So at this point, you wouldn't be able to offer a judgment on how realistic it is that remains will be salvaged, brought out for the families?
In terms of human remains, I think it is quite realistic. It's something we can't rule out, and I've got reasons for saying that because we know that there were people in the drift or around about the drift entrance at the time. We know there's been subsequent blasts. We know that 2 people walked out. Daniel came out, who helped his colleague to come out. So otherwise, we wouldn't have known about them. So the truth is, again, a lot of assumptions because that's all people have had to go on. But now we're going to have an opportunity to go and have a look at this drift, and then that will open up a whole different line of discussion around about the technical forensic recovery and potentially the human forensic recovery. And I do believe that there's a high likelihood of both.
And what other answers could we get from this?
Well, we could get some. It might not give us absolute answers, but it might narrow the in terms of what happened. It might narrow some of the options in terms of the things that may not have happened, in terms of particular pieces of equipment that may or may not have been switched on. So there's some theories about why the mine exploded. We know it was a gas explosion initially. And the way you carry out these investigations is you go through it by a process of elimination. You don't shoot straight to a pet theory and then try and find the evidence to fit. You actually do the exact reverse. You go through a process of elimination. So this would be the beginning of that process of elimination. To be honest, has never started because there's never been access to the drift. So this is the process beginning.
Do you think they will be able to tell if anyone survived the first blast?
That's a moot point. It depends what we find. I think if we found human remains, if we found evidence of any bodies where attempts have been made to open self-rescuers, those sort of things, I think that would strongly point towards the potential that somebody made an attempt. And those are the sort of things I think would be, they would be indicative. So if somebody has made a realistic attempt to open a self-rescuer, then like Daniel, who made an attempt to open his, he wasn't successful. He managed to survive by taking gulps of air through the compressed air range. But if we found people who'd been attempting to open self-rescuers, if we found those self-rescuers which had been manually opened, even if they'd been blown down the drift, for instance, then that might point in that direction. But I think it's not fair to speculate on the families. It's all speculation. I really don't want to go down there. I'm just telling you some of the things that might point towards us. So evidence is what we're looking for.
Tony, what will your role be?
It's dependent on the Pike River Agency. I've made it clear from the outset I want to be involved in the re-entry, and I've had a reasonable indication from Dave Gunn that I will be involved in the primary team that goes in. I certainly want to be part of that group. I don't have any particular claim to it, except that I have, been along this journey for quite a long time. I've always said that I was prepared to re-enter, and I think from the family's point of view now, they want a representative there, and I'm very proud to fulfil that role if that's what's chosen. But ultimately, it'll be down to the Pike River Agency to decide. I think I do bring a particular skill set. I do have particular skills in re-entering. I've probably done more re-entries, to be honest, than anyone else, including anybody at the Pike River Recovery Agency. But that's a decision for them to take.
Have they given you any indication, Tony? You've obviously made your. You've obviously made it clear that that's what you'd like to do.
I think they've indicated that I would be. Yeah, I think I've got a strong hand in that particular option. But as I say, I'm not going to overplay that. It's an operating mine. Dingy's the manager, and Dave Gunn's the chief executive. They're the ones that call the shots, and I'll be led by them. I hope that I can make a contribution, and I'll be disappointed if I can't. But for me, the main thing is that the re-entry is going ahead. My personal role in it is secondary.
And I was talking to Tony Forster there, who is a former Chief Mines Inspector. Let's go to Fiji now, where voters have braved heavy rain and flash flood warnings to have their say in today's general election. It's just the second election since the 2006 coup. Polling centres have just closed, and RNZ Pacific's Sally Round joins us now from a voting centre in Suva. Voila, Sally, how is the mood been there today?
Well, people have been excited about going to the polls once again. As you said, only the second election in 12 years here in Fiji. I'm here at the National Results Centre in Otara in the capital, Suva. Voting has just closed. Now, you could say that election day has not gone to plan. The heavy rain, the flooding has caused all sorts of problems. But we did go out with one voter earlier today.
Leone joined queues in Suva last night to check where he had to go to cast his vote this morning.
We are on the queue just to clarify where about our polling station tomorrow. Just on the last day, and now we're very excited of that.
The hotel porter was up and about early to get to the polling station he'd been assigned to, about 20 minutes walk from his home in Nasinu.
We're really feeling good, and we're really excited to go to vote this morning. We're really waiting for this day, this morning.
Vote and make it count, my people. And yes, don't let the rain deter you. Don't let
Fiji's voting system radically changed under the 2013 constitution, which abolished voting along communal or ethnic lines and brought in one national constituency. It was brought in by the military-led government, which ousted the elected Laisenia Ngarase government in 2006. In the first election since the coup, there was a very high 84% voter turnout, indicating people's desire to have their voice heard after so many years of military rule. This time, voters have a choice of 233 candidates from 6 political parties, vying for 51 seats. So Leone, how was the voting? You've just voted. How are you feeling about that?
I just came back from vote, just cast my vote this morning, and I was really happy to cast my vote this morning.
Why are you so happy?
And I was so happy because we've been waiting for today. Like for the past few days, for the past few weeks, we've been listening to all the fresh news that's coming to us, and we are looking forward this morning to come and cast our vote.
Polling stations close at 6 this evening. Votes are counted at the 1,800 polling stations and results phoned through to a central counting centre. These provisional results are then collated with early polling and postal ballots before the final result is released in the next few days.
Well, if you were watching Sally's piece or even listening, you would have noticed the torrential rain there. Sally, what effect did that have on some of the polling stations?
Well, since we did that report, polling was suspended at 28 polling stations. That's a block of some 7,000 voters among about 550,000 voters who were meant to go to the polls today. Now, the supervisor of elections has said that it was a low turnout. And all afternoon, they've been urging people to get out to the polls, put on their gumboots, get an umbrella and just get out there. They even got bus companies to put on free buses, stressing that they weren't connected to any political parties, critical that they got out and vote. The polls have now closed, so we wait to see what's happened.
We've heard that the media restrictions around the election have been extended. Is that the case? And if so, why?
Yes, the extension of that media blackout where we aren't allowed to, we accredited journalists here have to follow the electoral law, which is basically not talking to any politicians, obviously, no campaigning stuff, but even extending to opinion and debate, that can't be talked about at all. So that has been extended indefinitely at this stage, or at least until further notice, because those polling stations that where polling was suspended, those votes, those ballots will be shredded, and the people there will have to go back to the vote. And so they're saying, you know, when the weather clears, perhaps that might be the case, that they go back then, but we don't know.
So Frank Bainimarama, what did he have to say when he cast his vote?
Well, we were there when he cast his vote. He tried to join the queue, but they ushered him forth to go first. He said that he was looking forward to winning.
So, and his main opposition, Sitiveni Rambuka, he had a victory this week in court, cleared of filing a false electoral declaration. Do you think he's bothering to write a victory speech at this point?
Lisa, that's one of the things I can't talk about under this media blackout.
Interesting, isn't it? So, other people, how were they feeling about going out casting their votes today? The ones that braved the weather.
Yeah, that's right. Those people, they seem very excited about it. You know, there is a security issue here that people do go out and stock up over election time. We heard, you know, people might be getting, you know, a couple of weeks worth of food. They haven't gone out in the days previous, just, you know, making sure they're not spending any money so that they've got enough to see them buy if anything does happen. The police commissioner put out a statement yesterday stressing that security was all in hand, but there had been some rumour mongering going on, and some people had been taken in for questioning around sort of incitement, but stressing that he was talking with the military and things were secure and safe for people in Fiji to go and vote.
That is Sally Round. Thanks for joining us, Sally, who is at a vote counting centre there in Suva. Interestingly, what she is able to say is controlled very strictly by reporting rules there around the election. Back home, rolling teacher strikes taking place around the country continued in Canterbury today. Primary and intermediate teachers marching in Christchurch echoed the message of their colleagues further north. They also want pay increases and improved working conditions, but they say that their classrooms are even more complex as they continue to deal with the effects of the earthquake and the associated trauma. Katie Todd reports.
Our kids need to reach their best.
As hundreds of teachers marched from Horncastle Arena to Hagley Park, their message was clear. They want more money, more resources and smaller class sizes. And they say classrooms in post-quake Canterbury face even more challenges than most. Ninochka Mackay's 9-year-old daughter, Isla, attends Rolleston Christian School. She says Canterbury children need extra support and resources in the classroom as they deal with earthquake trauma.
My child is one that was 2 during the earthquakes, so she's managed quite well and she's quite resilient, but there are children who aren't coping as well, and I think government really needs to acknowledge that Christchurch does have mental health issues that aren't prevalent throughout the rest of the country.
She says big classroom sizes of 60+ students aren't the best place for vulnerable children.
It's a huge ask for the average child to self-manage in a classroom of 60+ children. But for children with behavioural issues, this is impossible, and we're not setting our teachers up to succeed, we're setting them up to fail.
Shirley Hirangi Harrison, a teacher from Beckenham School, says teaching in Canterbury isn't necessarily more difficult than anywhere else in the country, but it definitely brings different challenges.
Yes, we've got to cope with maybe different sets of things, probably slightly different stresses for our
our parents and our teachers, given the nature of what they have to live in. However, the job remains the same, and the fact that we're not given the support and the resource and the people to cope with the conditions is what we're most upset about.
She says the protest isn't just about getting a pay rise, it's about making teaching a profession that people want.
We can't get relievers. We can't retain the young staff because nobody wants to do this job. So for us, it's not about the money. It never was about the money. This is about getting the support to do the job that we want to do and to be able to do it well and give it the aroha that it deserves.
Bevan Turner is studying to be a primary school teacher at the University of Canterbury and says he isn't put off from entering the profession with 1 year to go in his studies. But he says it's clear there is a huge amount of work to do in Canterbury.
I've seen it firsthand in schools that since before the earthquakes and now kids are coming into new entrance classrooms and the like, not knowing basic things like how to read or how to count or even what their own name is and how to recognise their own name when it's written down. And it's quite a heartbreaking thing to see that in our schools there are kids who need this really intentional, deliberate support and they're not being able to get it.
Today's strike is estimated to have affected more than 50,000 schoolchildren. For many of them, it was the perfect day to head along to Christchurch's A&P show, with the show director saying it was a far bigger crowd than usual. The rolling strike continues tomorrow for the rest of the South Island and then Wellington on Friday. For Checkpoint in Christchurch, call Katie Todd, 10A.
And a bit of time now for your feedback. This from David on Waiheke. I'm so pleased for the families, he says. I wasn't a great fan of Andrew Little when he was leader of the opposition, but he has impressed me on and off since. This took real courage, he says. Old get some guts John should take note, says David. Another one saying the mine has to be investigated properly. 29 dead. Some people think we should close it up and walk away. Slack-ass attitudes like that become dangerous if mining companies cut corners in cost-cutting moves. Thank you for joining us today. We will catch you again tomorrow.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Dingy Pattinson says leading the re-entry into the Pike River mine will fulfil his promise to recover the bodies of the 29 men who died. The Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern has told Myanmar's leader Aung San Suu Kyi she wants to help work on a solution to the Rohingya refugee crisis. The Education Ministry says 550 foreign teachers have so far been cleared to work here after a recruitment campaign that's had 3,000 responses. The Transport Accident Investigation Commission has opened an inquiry into the death of a crew member on a Sanford fishing boat off Banks Peninsula this morning. And a body has been found that's believed to be that of Michelle Simpson, who went missing in Waitakere on Monday morning. Our next news